Hi, I'm Cheryl from Avoca. In this video we'll complete the SSS shader. So where we left off, we added normal maps, spec maps, we've already added the skin diffuse, and of course the spec power. We've also gone and named everything accordingly. So again, if you haven't already done so, hit the apply changes button and we will save this again. So right click and save from the content browser. Okay, now what we're going to focus on are these three options: your subsurface in-scattering colour, your subsurface absorption colour, and your subsurface scattering radius. Okay, so the subsurface in-scattering colour, it will contain the body subdermal, and we will be multiplying it with the lerp from the diffuse, which is quite easy to do. It doesn't sound as daunting. So what we need to do is bring in the body subdermal map. So I'll just move this to the side and I'll go into my textures and I will find the body subdermal, which is right here. So I'll select that, come into here, and I'll hit T and click, and we've imported that texture. And while we're here, we may as well name it. So I'll call it subdermal texture. Okay, and I'll just move the normal map out of the way just so I can make a little bit more room. Okay, now we're going to do the same as what we did with the diffuse, and we're going to have a colour, so you can change the colour slightly for the subdermal. So what we'll do is we need to bring in a constant vector 3. So again, in the material expression, start typing in constant or hold down 3 and click. And again, we want to turn this into a parameter. So right click and choose convert to parameter. And we shall give this a name and put this into a group. So parameter name, we'll call this body subdermal. And I'm going to create a group called SSS, subsurface scattering. And of course description, body subdermal. Okay. We're just going to multiply these together. So bring in a multiply again, material expressions, type in multiply and drag it, or M and click. And we'll multiply the RGB of the subdermal with the RGB of the colour. So what we'll do is we'll just give this some sort of a colour, give it like a, I guess a browny fleshy tone sort of colour, if I can get that. Okay, that'll do for now. We can tweak that later on. Okay. What we now need to do is we need to use this lerp here in conjunction with the subdermal. The reason why we're doing that is because this lerp has already got the skin mask applied to it. And so we don't have to worry about generating these again. We can just connect the lerp up to a multiply to connect these up. So I'll just move this out of the way a little bit and we'll bring in a multiply. We'll plug the multiply of the subdermal into the B of this multiply, and what we can do is we can grab the lerp from the skin mask and drag it down to this multiply. You might have to move, you can see what I'm doing here, I'm moving around the screen like so, just so I can get it around. Plug that into the A. So as you can see, that's only looking at the skin because that's all we want. Okay. Now the next thing we want to do is we're going to lerp it again. Now I can copy and paste this, which I will probably do. So all I need is another interpolate, the 0 and the 1 minus and skin mask. So I'm going to Control C to copy, Control V to paste. And that's created a duplicate of that, so you don't have to worry about bringing them in again. So if you want to make duplicates, it's very simple. Control C and Control V. Another way of doing it, I'll show you on, say, the texture sample, is if you hit Control W, that also duplicates that. And what that'll do is that'll duplicate and keep the same settings. Okay. So we want to plug in this subdermal, the end result multiply to the interpolate of the skin mask. And we're plugging this into the subsurface inscattering color. Like so. And that's all we need to do for the inscattering color. So what we'll do now is we will just comment all of these. So if we highlight them all and come in and right click anywhere on the grey area and new comment, and we'll call this inscattering color. And just drag that out to make it bigger. Okay. And we'll just move that to the side. Okay, the next section we're going to work on is the subsurface absorption color. So what we now need to do is we need to bring in the body backscatter. So we move this to the side and we will select the body backscatter, which is right here. And we will bring him in, so you can click and drag, or you can highlight it, hold down T and click. Okay. Now, because these is going to be pretty much the same as your in-scattering color, but of course this is backscatter, we still want the same settings here. We don't need to connect up the epidermis or the diffuse to this. So all we need to grab from here is your interpolate, your constant, your 1- and your skin mask. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate those. So Control C and V or Control W. And we'll move that to the side. That saves us having to go in and try and type in or find all the data for each of those nodes again. We can copy and paste. So I'll just move that to the side a little. And we're going to connect this up. Now again, we might want to create a different color so we can control the color of the body backscatter a little bit more. So we'll come into here and we want a constant 3. So 3 and click. Or of course, type in constant and you'll get the constant vector 3. And turn this into a parameter. So right click, convert to parameter. And we shall give this a name. And we'll call it back scatter color. Now we'll plug that into the SSS group, the subsurface scattering group. So click on the drop down arrow and choose SSS. And we'll give it the description, of course, back scatter color. And we'll give this another orangey browny sort of feel to it. So, again, we can change it later on. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply the color with the texture sample. So, the body backscatter texture sample. So, M and click, or in the material expression, type in multiply and drag it in. Connect the RGB of the texture sample to the A of the multiply. And of course the RGB of the color to the B. You'll see it's got like a orangey sort of orangey browny color to it. Now, what we also need to do is we need to create an absorption color node for the absorption part of it. And we're going to multiply the absorption with the backscatter. So that'll give it more of a skinny sort of tone feel to it. So what we need to do is we need to bring in 2 more multiplies. So M and click, M and click, because what we're going to do is multiply the backscatter with the absorption colour. And why we brought in another multiply is because we're going to multiply the absorption colour on itself to make it more intense, just like what we did with the diffuse colour. So come back here. We want a constant 3 again. And right click, convert to parameter. And we'll give this a name of absorption colour. We'll put that in the SSS group. And of course, description, absorption colour. And I'll just make this a light colour for now. We want to multiply it by itself. And we want to connect the result of the backscatter multiplied with the absorption colour. So the result of the backscatter, the multiply goes into the A of this multiply, and the result of the absorption multiply into the B of this multiply, like so. Okay, we can now connect this up with the skin mask. So we just connect this multiply to the A of the interpolate. And as you can see, you've got the result here. This now gets plugged into the subsurface absorption colour. So grab the result of the lerp and plug it into here, like so. Now we will give this a name, or we'll group this. As you can see, it starts to get larger. This is why it's very handy to be able to group them like so. So highlight them all, and then right click and choose new comment, and we'll call that backscatter absorption color. Okay. Now, the last thing we want to do is the scattering radius. Now, this just needs to be a constant 1 because we need to give it some sort of a value. So all we need to do is either come into material expression, type in constant and drag in a constant, or 1 and click. Turn that into parameter, so right click, convert to parameter. And we'll just give this a name as per normal. So parameter name, we'll call it scatter radius. We'll plug that into the SSS group. And description, scatter radius. Now this is where you can either have the figures too high or too low. Now I've already played with this shader earlier and I found a figure that is right for this character to what I think looks good. You can play with it as much as you like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the default value to 0.3 to start with. Now all we do is we plug in this into the subsurface scattering radius like so. Okay. So we have now created a simple SSS shader for your body texture. So what we'll do is now do the same thing for the head texture. Okay, once you've done all that, don't forget to apply and save. Now, the same thing is going to apply to the head. The exact same thing. All you need to do for the head is swap out the diffuse textures, the epidermis, spec map, the normal map, the subdermal texture, the backscatter texture, and of course the skin masks. Now because the skin mask was a duplicate, once you change it from one, they will all change to be the same, but in case it doesn't, because sometimes UDK can have a bit of a quirk, just make sure that the skin mask textures have been swapped out correctly. Okay, So now what I'll do is I'll show you how to create a copy of this material so you can go ahead and apply that to the head. So I'll just close this one down. And I'll just save my package. I know we already have a material for the head, but we're going to override this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this first. Now, I'll show you what happens if you were to remove a material. So if I decide to delete this, if I right click and choose delete, it'll say, oh, hang on a minute, but this has already got something attached to it. I know that. So if I click OK, then what I want to do is I want to right click and choose delete force. And it's saying, are you sure? It's warning me, are you sure? And I'll say yes to all. Now, if I now have a look at Selena, what's happened is her head texture, because her material is missing, has just gone back to the default. So if you ever see this happen, it's just because something's been removed that needs to be put back. So to make a copy of this texture, all you do is with the Selena body map, you highlight it, right click, choose create a copy. Okay. Now that's already in the mesh group. We'll leave it in there, and later on I'll show you how to just create a material group, same way as we did textures, basically. And we'll call it Matte Selena Head. And OK. Don't forget to save. Okay. Now what we want to do is swap out those textures. So if you double click on the Matte Selena Head, and what I want you to do is I want you to go through and swap out the diffuse textures for the correct textures. I'll show you one example, and then I'll let you carry on and complete the rest of it. So at the moment we've got the diffuse texture here, and I want to swap the body one out. As you can see, it's the body for Selena's head diffuse. So I'll just move this to the side, and we'll find her head diffuse. There it is there. So you select the head diffuse, come back into the material editor for the head. With that selected, come down here to the green arrow and click. And as you can see, that has swapped that out. So if you could go ahead and do that again for the Selena diffuse texture, the skin mask, there's one for the head, the skin epidermis, there's one for the head, the normal map, spec map, the subdermal texture, and your back scatter, as well as your other skin masks. Make sure they are also updated. Don't forget to apply and save. And then what we want to do is we want to apply that to the character. So once you've gone and done that, open up the character. I'll just move it to the side. Find the material, so the Selena head. Now mine has not been finalized, so she is going to look a little bit funny. So make sure you select the Selena head material. With that selected, come into the mesh and come into the LOD info, expand the elements, and you'll notice that number 1 has material equals none, and if I was to select it, you can see it selected the head. So we expand that, come into material with the Selena head selected, click on the green arrow, and that's applied it. Like so. And don't forget to save. So go ahead, make those changes, and when we come back, we will turn it into an instance and I'll show you how to tweak it.